Hello and welcome everyone to Coach Connect Live. So glad to be here with all of you. My name is Eloise Aone and I am the Director of Coach Connect at the Muse and Fairygodboss. And today for this Coach Connect Live, we're going to be talking about finding career clarity so that you can take those steps in your career with direction and purpose and feel awesome about taking them. And I am thrilled to be joined by Cassie Spencer, who is a total pro in all of this, who's going to be talking to us specifically about 5 strategies that you can implement today to find that career clarity. So Cassie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yes, wonderful. And you're not our first guest, not the first time that you join us as a guest. So welcome back. Thank you for your time and expertise today. Briefly, before we jump in, for those of you who don't know Coach Connect, it is the place you can come to at the Muse and Fairygodboss to find a career coach to help you take that next step in your career. Whether you are within your organization and you have motivation to make a switch or a change or grow, or if you're thinking of a career change and you need to either find clarity, get ready for that interview process, applying to jobs, figuring out what that even looks like, you can come to Coach Connect and we will match you with a coach who meets your areas of expertise, your needs, your personality, whatever it is that you're looking for to help you take those steps. So come back and check us out. Actually, at the end of today, we're going to be sharing a little code for you to use for 10% off a coaching session with us. So make sure to stick around and to use that after today. So Cassie, so many people come to us, to the Muse and to Fairygodboss, wanting to make a shift in their career.
Right.
And it's not necessarily always about making a huge shift. It can be small shifts, right? But taking those shifts or instigating that shift can be difficult. Like, where do you start, right? So I'm really looking forward to jumping in and hearing from you how you talk about this with your clients at the Muse and Fairygodboss. But before we do that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience today so that they can get a sense of who you are and how you fit into all of this.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited to be back and always love doing these events with the Muse and with Fairygodboss and with you, Eloise. And I am a proud Coach Connect member. I've been with the Muse since 2016. So a good long time that I've been coaching with the Muse and working with hundreds and hundreds. I've lost count. Someone could pull the number, but probably 600 or 700 plus clients.
Oh yeah, at least. Yeah.
Via the Muse and Fairygodboss, diving into all the things you mentioned, from making a really minor shift to making a total career pivot, diving into interview and resume writing, preparing people for negotiation conversations and effective job searching. And it is a career path that I love, and a career path where I get to help so many people really refine and find their next career move.
Yeah, that's great. And you can see on Cassie's profile that she has fabulous reviews from all the clients that she's worked with. So go check her out for sure at the end of this session. So Cassie, if I were a client of yours and I were to join you in conversation and be like, listen, I want to make a shift. I feel stuck in my career. I don't know where to start. How would you help them take those next steps, find that clarity in the process itself?
Yeah, I think the first thing to recognize, and probably, so many people that are in the chat, I see where you're all tuning in from, which is wonderful. But I think the first piece to know in the context of finding clarity is that this is such a common experience. And regardless of if you are a couple months out of graduation and entering into your career for the first time or into a job search for the first time, whether you are 10 or 12 or 20, whatever years into your career, that need or that kind of urge to find clarity comes up multiple times. And it's very common for clients to come to calls and to coaching and to say, like, I know I need to do this, but I don't know what, or I don't know how, or not even kind of knowing where to begin. And that often leads to a very overwhelming process. So I love to kind of start with that piece of it, that it is a common experience and that it's also something that happens at all stages of our careers. I recently had a client who had been in their same, not just industry, but in the same company for over 12 years and kind of came to a call with that exact feeling and thought of like, I know I need to do something different, but I don't know what that is. And I don't know if that's quit my job and make an entire pivot, or if that is just like, is it time to do something a little new? So I always like to kind of give those examples of what this can actually look like, and to also, you know, acknowledge that it is perfectly okay to come to a coaching call and to say, I don't know what I need, but I need something.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, you know, the longer you stay in a position or on a track, the harder it can be to kind of figure out whether you need a change or should need a change, right? That routine. Yeah. But then also, yes, like sometimes it's no, you started off in one direction and you thought that's maybe what you wanted, but you're not happy or it's not fulfilling something for you. But then it's like, well, what else is out there, and how do I even know where to start, right? So that's great. So let's dive in a little bit more. What would be the next thing that you would share with a client? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the first steps that I like to start with anytime I'm working with a client, and this is something that you can start thinking about right now if you're watching, and you can jot this down on a piece of paper or, you know, on a notes app or something. But one of the very first things that I like to do is talk with clients about non-negotiables. And we have an article from the Muse that walks you through this. And so that resource will end up in the chat. But essentially, your non-negotiables are the things that you absolutely need in your job. So I like to start with the easiest and most simple things. For some people, they absolutely need a remote job. It is a non-negotiable. They can't move. They won't move. Great. Some people really love a hybrid or an in-person environment right now. If that is a non-negotiable for you, great. But we want to start with these items that really give us a baseline to finding clarity, both in terms of what in my current role or environment is creating some of that tension, but also then when you're looking at future opportunities, it is simply just a reality that not every career path and not every company is going to align with the things you want and need. And so having that list of non-negotiables and knowing kind of what your baseline is can be such an easy kind of starting point to say, like, this career path is not the most ideal, or this is going to be a career path that requires a lot more kind of specific companies or roles to find because of these other non-negotiables. So start with the easy things. I think, you know, hybrid, in-person, remote is an easy one. Of course, salary comes up a lot. A lot of people have a standard. You may know what you absolutely need to make to keep that baseline or to pay the bills that you have. Other things that can be in your non-negotiables, I have had clients put, obviously, health benefits is important to a lot of people. I've had some people put, this is a newer one that I'm seeing, they want pet insurance, which I think is wonderful. You know, I've had people think about the other stipends of like a work from home stipend or those technology stipends, professional development stipends. So a lot of it does center around the benefits, but you can also be thinking about non-negotiables like, I want to work with a small, close-knit team, or I want to work at a really big company that has a lot of room for growth and opportunity and networking. And so, you know, this list can be something that ebbs and flows a little bit, but the goal of starting to find clarity is at least thinking about, what do I want and need?
Yeah. And so would you recommend sitting down with yourself and maybe the other important people in your life, like if you have someone who you share a life with, for example, or you have dependents, and think about your needs, their needs, and then the needs of a family as a whole, if that is the case for someone, and then like look at what's working and not working today? Is that a good place to start to build that out?
Yeah, I think that's a great start to build that out, and to also know that this doesn't have to be something where you develop a list of, here's my 10 things and they never change. It can be something today where you're like, okay, these are my preferences and it's 2 or 3 things. And then as you go throughout the process of both gaining clarity, but also the process of potentially job searching or making a pivot, there may be things that you realize like, actually hybrid would be okay if it's within a certain commutable distance, or actually I'd prefer this, but for the right job, that's what people always say, for the right job. So what are those things that for the right job you would ebb and flow on? And so know that I always say to clients, like, this can be a living and breathing list. Things can come off. Things can come to the top priority. This is an absolute non-negotiable. And then there can be the other wish list items as well.
Yeah. I think that's great. It's making me think of a phrase. I was just talking to someone earlier today, and we were talking about how saying no to certain things is actually saying yes to yourself.
Yes.
Right. So I'm thinking about this list is really like, what are the yeses for you? Right. And there might be things that there's pressure on, that you're getting pressure for, like going into the office if you really want remote, but it's like, say yes to what you need first. And that's such a powerful place to start in a job search. So I love that that's your first step.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in that same vein of like, what are you saying yes to and what are you saying no to? For a lot of people, the clarity aspect, it's overwhelming because we live in a world where there are so many choices. There's so many industries and there's so many companies and there's so many jobs and so many job titles that it can be this like, what am I even looking for? And part of knowing what you're looking for also then means you have to know what is not it, right? What are we not looking for? Because that can also narrow down our list and direct our focus.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It takes away all the extra and helps you focus. I love that. Nice.
Perfect. So after you kind of start to develop this list, and again, it can kind of ebb and flow a little bit, but one of the next things I like to really work with clients on is assessing your interests. And some of that may come up in determining your non-negotiables, but this is also where we really start to get into like, what do you like? What do you want to be doing? I love to talk with clients and to work through developing like an energizing list. I'm a big list person, but a list of things that when you think about your work, whether that's day to day, week by week, one-off projects, it can even be things not work related. What gives you energy? Because knowing the tasks and responsibilities and environments that you're more excited to work on, that do energize you, those projects that you can kind of get lost in for 30 minutes or 3 hours versus the things that are draining you day in and day out, is such a powerful additional starting point to really gain some of that clarity. And this again can be a list that if things are popping into your mind right away, starting to write those down. But this is also something I encourage people to do, like at the end of the workday. If you do work from home, keep a sticky note on your desk or keep a Google Doc open and write those things down. If you're commuting home, that can be something that you're thinking about and recording a voice memo or anything like that. But it is such a powerful opportunity to look back at a week or 2 weeks, maybe even a month, and to say, what are the trends in terms of the things I'm doing for 7 or 8 hours a day that are really draining me versus the things that I would love to be spending more time on. And this is something I've done in my own life and led to some career shifts and changes in my work. And it's so, I think, empowering to be able to see that. And then to also have a starting point where if there are things in your current job that are more energizing, even if you're not making a total shift yet, that can be a really great starting point to talk to a supervisor or a manager to identify then again what you're saying yes to, what projects or committees or opportunities you're raising your hand for versus the ones of like, nope, that's not for me right now. And starting to create that little shift even before considering a total career change or a pivot.
Yeah, I think that's great, right? It gives you clarity to take those small, tiny steps or the big one. And so let's say that I realized that I loved working on a project, right? I can imagine the list is not love working on projects, right? But it's like doing the work of saying, okay, well, did I love the planning of the project? Like is it you break it down by task, or how would you break up that list?
Yeah, great question. I would definitely start with breaking it down by tasks. And although it can feel a little repetitive, like keep asking yourself why. If you're like, I loved that project. Okay. Why or what did you love about it? And then if you're like, I loved the planning. Great. What about that? Or why did you love the planning? Are you a super organized person? Is that a skill set that you just have and that you can own? Is it that you loved planning it because you could see how all the little pieces came together to create this bigger project and like the final vision? Maybe you loved planning it because of the people that you were working with, and you felt that they really listened to your ideas, or you had a great brainstorm back and forth. So there can be so many reasons and kind of elements that contribute to us enjoying or feeling energized by a project, and breaking that down as much as possible. I think pull out a piece of paper, do this as like a journaling exercise, but continuing to ask yourself, like, what did I enjoy about that? What pieces of it did energize me? Why did I like that? And continuing to go down that path can really help you see some nice themes in terms of like, oh, every time I get to plan something, or I get to be on that like behind the scenes back end of something, I love that in my work. And I love, having these teams that are super collaborative. Maybe that doesn't mean like, okay, I'm job searching for something that's collaborative, but it can mean that you're then really informed to network with people and to see who you click with at different companies that you may be interested in. Can also be a great question that you're then asking in interview. So whatever that next pivot is, we're not only creating clarity of what do I need now, but then clarity of, is this next thing right for me?
Yeah. Great. I love that. And I think that the consistency of doing it, whatever a regular basis is to each of us, right, helps us kind of see those patterns. I think that sometimes when things are easy, it's almost like we don't even notice.
Nope.
But ease can be energizing, right? It's like you don't use as much energy, right? So we almost forget that we even did it because it's like it was an easy thing to do. And we tend to focus and remember the stuff that's harder, right? So I think that what's wonderful about this list too is that you're flipping that and you're forcing all of us to think, okay, well, what's great? What is it that's working versus focusing on the negative? Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I feel like this then leads into, this is the perfect segue because it leads into then really identifying our skills. And I think that again is something that, especially if you've been in your career and working for a handful of years, it's easy to kind of brush off those things that come easily, and it's easy to forget the valuable skills that you have. I was working with another client recently, diving through clarity, and she was really struggling to identify her skills. And she works at a larger company that has regular performance reviews and evaluations. And she was like, yeah, I have that saved somewhere. And I was like, pull that up. Like, let's look at that. What are people saying year over year, quarter over quarter? What are they saying about working with you? And I think we can talk about some other ways to identify skills, but if you have those performance reviews, or if you can even think back to like, what are people always complimenting you on, or saying like, thank you so much for being so detailed in that follow-up, or thank you for, being so helpful when it comes to brainstorming ideas. Like, really identifying what are those hard skills, of course, that you have, but also what are some of those soft skills? Because then when we compare the interests and the things that you enjoy doing with the skills plus your non-negotiables, that gives us even more direction and momentum into where you're looking. And again, what jobs may make sense for you.
Yeah, I love it. You're putting yourself in the driver's seat, right? Without that clarity, without that self-knowledge, and we might know it inside, but having it clear and written down and out there kind of creates this almost this roadmap for you. So then what's the next step? How do you actually start using these three lists?
Yes, great question. So you have these things, you're kind of starting to get a little bit of clarity. And then the next step really is to try things. And I know everyone is so busy. We all have so many things between work and life, and that this advice to like, go try things can feel a little silly. But I do think it's important to, when you're looking to have this clarity, and if you truly want clarity, the fastest and best way to get that is to try things. And so there's a lot of ways we can try things. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, there may be opportunities in your current work to say yes to certain projects, to jump on certain types of calls, or to join a committee that allows you to focus your efforts and to further improve those skills, gain new skills based on the things that you're enjoying and have identified through these lists. I think volunteer work and freelance work, project work, all of that type of opportunity can be so great to really allow yourself to test something out before you're committing to another job or before you dive into a job search, which there's no denying that the job search is a little bit rougher right now, maybe a lot rougher right now for a lot of people. And so thinking about these other ways that you can be strategic, test out these areas, start to gain some experience, and then to have additional clarity and that additional experience that could go on a resume or a LinkedIn is a really smart way to go about it. And I'll just add to that, like there are so many opportunities, whether it's volunteer work or projects or committees, to do things that are a lower time commitment. A project doesn't have to mean that you're spending, 20 additional hours outside of work to like create an app or something like that. It can be a smaller project. You can team up with people. If you have a friend or a classmate or a former coworker that you know and trust and can kind of pitch an idea to and say like, hey, what do you think about this? There can be some ways to do this and to have that lower commitment to it. In addition to those, I would also say there's just a lot of resources, and we can dive into some of them, but resources to like try out different skills, whether it be through a shorter online course or a tutorial, to even gain some of those hard skills as well.
Yeah, that's great. Put it into action, right? I think that we all feel like going back to the driver's seat, right? And then you have to like put it into gear, right?
Yes.
So sometimes it can feel like, oh, I want to make this shift, but it requires a job search. It requires all these difficult things, leaving a job, etc. But what you're saying is just like, don't think too hard. Just do it. Find a way to start doing it. And that actually probably will build the momentum towards that next clear step for you. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
100%. Yeah. So once you've started to kind of do some of those things, one of the last things that I like to think about, and this is a little bit more when you're at that stage of really starting to find more of that clarity. And I think it's important to note that like a lot of people don't ever have a 100% like clear vision, especially before you've really entered a career path. Trying it out is phenomenal. We obviously recommend that, but it's really hard for any of us to know, like with 100% certainty for the rest of my life, this is the thing I'm going to want. Our world changes, our life changes, we change, and everything changes. And that means your career path can change as well. And your goals and your non-negotiables, circling back, can all change. And so when you have a little bit more of that clarity, thinking about how you can reverse engineer it and start with that goal and work backwards, I think is also really helpful. If you go through this process and you determine that you really want a remote job, you want to work for an organization that has a really strong mission, these are things that have come up with clients lately, and that you want to be in a role where you get to be super creative, doing a lot of writing and working with a lot of different people, being very creative and innovative and that type of thing, then we can reverse engineer that. Obviously, we have to start to find some companies that exist in those spaces, and then potentially going back to your interest list of what missions would be most interesting and fulfilling to you. But then also looking at what are those additional opportunities that allow you to work on those skill sets, and really kind of thinking about that reverse engineering. What steps can I take that will help me get closer to that goal with that goal in mind? One other kind of activity that I like to walk some clients through, this comes from a book called Design Your Life, is where I first learned about it. I think probably a lot of other people have talked about this activity as well, but kind of thinking about your career obituary. And I know that can be a little like not the most fun to think about, but it's essentially this idea of like at the end of your career, when you retire, what are some of those things that you want? If you were to write a career obituary, you're still here, just you're now retired and you get to do, whatever you want. What are some of those things that you would want written in there? Are there accomplishments or accolades that you want or aspire to? Do you want it to say like, this person did their job, did it well, and really enjoyed life? What are those things that you want? Because
Yeah.
That can help then again circle back to essentially all these other lists and
The non-negotiables.
brainstorming.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it can
Yeah.
give you that clarity to kind of think about like at the end of this career and when I'm not working Monday through Friday or whatever your schedule is, like what do I want those things to, what do I want to look back on and what do I want those things to be and what will make me feel good about that? And I think
the legacy.
Yeah, that is another powerful starting point that can give you some clarity and help direct then where you go next.
Yeah, I love that. I think that could be very helpful for people. That would definitely be helpful for me, I think. It's like taking a giant step back and versus like focusing on right now. I also, one last thing on all these lists too, which I think is so powerful, is that it becomes true vocabulary that you can look for in job descriptions.
Yes.
Right? Like, and I know that I'm sure you say this to your clients too, Cassie, right? It's like, this becomes something concrete that you can use in looking for, as you search for jobs on the Muse and on Fairygodboss, for example, right? Like we have all these filters on our sites where you can search for keywords that could be on your list, right? And we're going to pull those jobs for you. It can help you read a job description with more clarity and more focus and strategy almost, so that you know what you're looking for because you've done that homework. Yeah. Nice.
And I'll add to that, in addition to the job search aspect and looking at job descriptions, it's also so powerful to have kind of these words and to be able to articulate the things that you want, need, the things that are important to you, your skills and interests. That comes into play in every aspect of it. Excuse me. That gives you content to talk about when you're networking. People are going to ask, who are you? Introduce yourself.
What do you want to do?
Right. Yeah. What are you interested in? This gives you that. If you're writing a cover letter, this is going to help with that. When you are interviewing, this is a great reflection piece too, to be able to talk about who you are. And probably one of the things I love most is that this helps you ask really intentional questions, whether you're networking or interviewing. Clients ask me that all the time. What should I ask at the end of the interview? It's like, ask questions that give you the answers, right? That give you that clarity of like, is this job going to be the best fit? And I think that's where these lists do take time. And I know I've had some clients who they don't love writing lists, but I can promise you that going through this process, you don't have to do it all at once, but slow and steady going through this process. And I say to some people, kind of let it be like, let it just sit in the back of your brain. And when that idea pops up, like pull out your phone, jot it down, do a voice note, whatever it may be. But allow that to kind of circulate throughout the day. And it will lead you to so much more clarity than before.
Yeah, great. I love this. And before we take just a few questions, because we only have like 2 minutes left, I think the other thing is, going back to the beginning of our conversation, finding career clarity doesn't mean finding the job title, right? We so often focus on what we want to achieve, and that's just impossible without taking these steps or similar steps, right? Adapting, the 5 strategies that you walked us through, Cassie, to work for each person, right? So it's about the journey as much as it is about landing with that clarity. So we have 1 minute left. Let me take a quick look at the questions. I'm so sorry, everyone, we won't be able to get to everything. Esdras, you asked about how can you work with Cassie and Eloise? I will drop the links to our coaching profiles in the chat right now. But as I do that, I think, Cassie, one question linked to what you were just saying, April asks, are there any particular tests such as Clifton's Strengths Finder or Color Insights to help identify the skills you recommend? So are there external tools to help you in this process that you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are. I am a fan of Strengths Finder, which is an assessment that will walk you through identifying your innate strengths. So the strengths don't necessarily always correlate 100% to like, it's not going to say you are organized at the end. But I think it is a really good assessment to help you identify and articulate how you operate in the workplace. One of my top Clifton strengths is discipline, which essentially comes down to organization. But the assessment gives you, I think, just a different perspective and a different language to be able to talk about those skills or strengths. So that is one I would recommend. There are a few others. There's a values assessment. I'm, of course, forgetting the name of it, but I think that one can be helpful too, of like, what do you value, and using that as a starting point to gain clarity as well.
Yeah, nice. Wonderful. Thank you, Cassie. There's one other question from Cami, but Cami, what I'll do is we'll get back to you in the Fairygodboss community. So thank you for your question. Cassie and I will put our heads together and give you an answer there for sure. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your questions and attention. Cassie, thank you for walking us through this. This is work that you do every day with your clients, and we see the impact thanks to the feedback that we get from everyone that you work with. So these are tried and true methods. If you want some time with Cassie, use that code we put in the chat there. The link to Cassie's profile is right there. You can use that to book some time. The service Stuck in a Rut is a great place to start with her, or a 30-minute Q&A if you want to just have a really brief follow-up to this session today. But again, Cassie, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. And I wish everyone to have a good day, and see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.